Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nitesh, and I'm here to discuss with your week 7 assignment and related topics today. So we are basically going to discuss about different story regarding different diseases that is mainly associated with animal physiology, and this is basically related to your neurodegenerative disorders. Okay. So before going to neurodegenerative disorders, let me discuss one point, that how all these things happen. This is basically our brain is a neural network. Okay, so it's a area that basically control and coordinate entire system. Okay, now the thing is that in our brain, what happen is there is different neurons that connected. Okay, so it's a combination of a network and synapses. Okay, now in that synapses the signal transmits by the neurotransmitters that are acetylcholine and GABA. There are so many. It can be excitatory, it can be inhibitory. That basically regulates all the functions, both effector as well as effector functions in the brain. Okay, now second point is that these neuronal tissues are not in mitotic phases, so that they always divide. Okay, so they are at Z0 state, quiescent stage, resting stage, so they cannot divide, they do not divide in our body. Okay, so the number of neurons that is present in our brain is constant. Okay, that we maintain. Okay, now the neurons, since the number of neurons maintained in our brain, now what they do, they, in case of any obstacles, they get degenerated. Okay, and if the neurons get degenerated, then what will happen? Then it will not get replaced, and that will result in some memory loss, that is, or some loss in the skill of learning, all these things. That is basically called your dementia. Okay, now let's move on to the slide of the class. Now the first question is that which of these is not a symptom of Alzheimer's disease? Okay, so there are different options like difficulty to remember, motor functions impairment, trouble determining locations, cognitive impairment. Okay, now if you can see this two structure, you will find in Alzheimer's brain the neurons get degenerated. Okay, now how this happens, as I told you, Alzheimer's disease is a brain disorder that slowly destroys memory, thinking skills, and eventually the ability to carry out simple tasks. Okay, now to happen this, okay, the simple concept is that during Alzheimer's, which is a age related problem, or which is a memory neuronal degeneration related problem, what happened here the neurons get degenerated. Which neurons? Cholinergic neurons. Okay, and that results in the loss of acetylcholine secretion. Clear? Now if the cholinergic neurons get degenerated, as you can see here, it is decreasing the size of the hippocampus as well as the size of the entire brain. Okay, so this is basically the point, is that during Alzheimer's disease, as here you can see, during Alzheimer's disease, hippocampus gets shrinked and the entire brain cortex gets shrinked. Okay, and that results in the process of neural degeneration, and that results with the cognitive function, affecting the cognitive functions. Now what is the cognitive function? Okay, the cognitive functions is basically, if I'll ask you what is the date today, what time today, what have you eaten in the morning, the simple memory, simple reminders, or you need to behave in a way, you need to identify something. This is what the cognitive behavior of us. Okay, this is basically related to your memory, thinking, and the skills. Okay, so all these things are regulated by your hippocampus. Okay, so due to the Alzheimer's disease, So what happened? All this cognitive impairment, trouble in determining location, difficulty to remember, all this cognitive related affects the brain. However, the motor impairment is not a part of Alzheimer's disease, because motor we will discuss in later. Okay, so this is basically results in the cognitive impairment, not in motor impairment. Okay, now the next question is that on the Alzheimer's disease is linked with the reduced synthesis of what? As I told you, in Alzheimer's disease, what happens? The cholinergic neurons get degenerated. Okay, and if the cholinergic neurons get degenerated, they results in the loss of acetylcholine. As here you can see what happens. Acetylcholine molecule is passed from the axon terminals, and they basically bind to the acetylcholine receptor. Okay, and that results in the transmission of signal. Okay, now if this process is done, if acetylcholine is not there, then the nerve transmission will get hampered. Okay, and if the nerve transmission will get hampered, then you will find memory loss, you will find thinking skill loss, you will find all the neuronal damages, right? Now once the acetylcholine get transferred from here, help in transfer of signals from here, and they just started stimulus in the next adjacent neurons. Now what happened? The acetylcholine esterase just broke down the acetylcholine into choline and acetyl, so that it can further transfer through the membrane and it can be reused as acetylcholine molecule. Okay. Now, which of this is linked to the Alzheimer's disease? Now see, what is the molecular mechanism of Alzheimer's disease? Okay, and which molecule is associated with this? During Alzheimer's disease, what happens? If you can see here, the beta secretase and gamma secretase are two enzymes that are responsible to form the or to cut the amyloid precursor of this particular beta amyloid. Okay, now there are several proteins in the membrane. Okay, so due to these enzymes that get released out in a unfolded state. For this reason, this is basically Alzheimer's disease. There are two proteins. One is tau and one is beta amyloid. Tau protein, what this protein do? The tau protein is basically aggregated inside the neuron. Okay, so if you will find like this, if like I would like to show you guys, so it is like just inside the neurons. Okay, it will just get aggregated inside the neurons. Okay, however, plaques are formed like this. Okay, if you will find, these plaques are basically formed by the unfolded amyloid beta. They form monomers, dimers, trimers and oligomers, and finally the fibrillar structure that forms the plaque. Okay, and these plaques are basically clumped in between neurons and malfunction the neuronal activity. Okay, so it is formed from the background of large proteins called amyloid precursor protein. One from beta amyloid 42 is thought to especially more toxic, that is amyloid 42. However, in the Alzheimer's brain, abnormal level of naturally occurring protein comes together to form between plaques that collect between neurons, disruption cell function. Okay, so basically these plaques are formed in between neurons, and this will gradually increase, and they help in the they obstruct in the process of neuronal transmission. Okay, you see, inside the neuron, it is the tau protein that is responsible for blockage of neurons, and outside the neurons, in between the neurons, that is in the intraneuronal junctions. Okay, it is the plaque that is made by the beta amyloid. Okay, now this is one more aspects of neuronal diseases, that is your Parkinson's disease. Okay, in Alzheimer's you will find the loss of cholinergic neurons, loss of acetylcholine, and results in the cognitive impairment. In Parkinson you will find the loss of dopamine, and it is results in your basically motor functions. Okay, now if you see this region, this region is basically, if you find, is like this. This region is basically your substantia nigra. Okay, So what is the reason? Basically here all the neurons are aggregated. You will find in June all the neurons are aggregated at that particular places. Okay, now if all the neurons are aggregated at this particular places, so in Parkinson's disease you will find this region get degenerated. Now if the substantia nigra get degenerated, that will result in the loss of this hormonal secretion, that is dopamine. And since all the neurons are aggregated at that particular positions, they are basically associated with the reflex section. Now what is the reflex section? Suppose you want to walk, suppose you want to go, suppose you want to do something because of some reason, and that is because of this effector functions that our brain is signalizing you that you need to do this, that. Now that for that purpose you need dopamine to be secreted. Okay, now due to the loss of substantia nigra, dopamine secretion get hampered, and if dopamine is not get secreted, that controls the different processing of neurons that affect the movement, attention and motivation. That is your all the motor functions get affected by the loss of dopamine, and that is because of the loss of substantia nigra. Okay, so in the Parkinson's disease, it is dopamine is that the loss of dopamine is the cause of disorder, and that results in the motor function. Clear? Here you can see the Parkinson's disease is a degenerative disorders that mostly affect the your motor activity. Clear? Now the next question is that linked to which area of the brain? As I have discussed, this is the reason that is called your substantia nigra. Okay. Now the next question is that the molecule not a precursor of metabolism which is used as a medication of Parkinson's. As I told you here, that it is occurring because of the loss of dopamine synthesis, right? Now in order to dopamine compensation, we can use the precursor molecule of dopamine that is called L-dopa, that can be used as a molecule to control the Parkinson's disease. Clear? Now the reduced level of DAX in the brain seem to cause Parkinson's disease. We already discussed, as you are seeing also, we are using L-dopa as a precursor molecule to control the disease, and you will find dopamine loss is the main reason that is responsible for the Parkinson's disease. Okay. Now one more aspect of the question or another disease is your ALS. Okay. Now what is ALS basically? So ALS is your amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Okay. Now what is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis? This is also one neurodegenerative disorders that is caused because of the excess of glutamate. See, Alzheimer's is loss of acetylcholine, your Parkinson's is loss of dopamine, but here it is because of excess of glutamate. Okay, so what does basically does is in this disease, this is also one of neurodegenerative disorders where the excess synthesis of glutamate is blocking the is excessively opening the sodium potassium channels that's released in this kind of disease that is also affect your motor actions. Okay, now what these drugs do, that is riluzole. Okay, so riluzole is a glutamate blocker. Okay, if it is a glutamate blocker, that means it inhibits the sodium channel, decrease the release of glutamate. It also increase the reuptake of glutamates in astrocytes. Okay, so basically you will find that it increases the reuptake of glutamate. Okay, so we are supposed, since glutamate, excess of glutamate is causing this disease, we need to reuptake the glutamates. Okay, and that is the things of this particular disease, is that you need to decrease the release of glutamate by you can decreasing directly, or you can reuptake. Okay, so why this is basically this aspect is considering for the treatment of ALS, because we believe, or scientists believe, that the Excessive exposure of glutamate may be the reason of the non-neuronal degeneration in ALS. Okay. So moving, so this is basically used for ALS, right? Now this aspect is that which of this is not type of glial cells? Okay, you all are much aware of this thing. Is that this is the very pretty simple answers, that is neurons. But if you consider the different type of neurological cells, then there are two systems in our brain, in our body. That is, one is CNS, one is PNS, right? One is central nervous system, one is peripheral nervous system. In peripheral nervous system, we mainly find two type of cells. One is satellite cells and one is Schwann cells. We all know Schwann cells is responsible for myelination of PNS, mind it. That in the peripheral nervous system, in the external neurons, it is the Schwann cells that myelinate, right? And satellite cells is basically surround the neuronal cells, but is ganglia, to regulate the neurotransmitter level. Okay, so in the peripheral nervous system, in a two system, that is, one is satellite cell that basically controls your external neurotransmitter secretions. Our Schwann cells is responsible for your myelination of neurons, right? But in CNS, you will find there are different type of cells like astrocytes, ependymal cells, oligodendrocytes, and microglia. Now astrocytes, what does it do? It maintains the blood-brain barrier, right? Ependymal cell, what it does? It maintains the producing CSF, right? It maintains the cerebrospinal fluid, which is also very much important. Okay, and what oligodendrocyte do? It myelinates the CNS actions and provides structural framework. Okay, so the oligodendrocytes maintain the internal, that is the CNS actions. Okay, it also myelinate, but it also it myelinates the CNS actions. However, Schwann cells myelinate the PNS actions. Okay, now the microglia is basically it acts as a phagocytes. It's as a immune cells in the brain, because our brain is very confined to the blood-brain barrier that is maintained by your astrocytes, right? So the external blood cannot pass the brain. So inside the brain, whatever any kind of immune emergency occurs, microglia are the principal cell that are responsible for the phagocytosis and immune response. Okay. So the next question is this: which of these myelinates neurons of central nervous system neurons? That is the oligodendrocytes that we have discussed. So this is very pretty straightforward. That CNS, there are 4 cells. Astrocytes are responsible for blood-brain barrier maintaining. Ependymal cells responsible for CSF formation. Oligodendrocytes for myelination in the CNS, and microglia as immune cells in the brain. However, satellite cells and Schwann cells are the part of PNS, and satellite cells responsible for your regulation of neurotransmitters. Our Schwann cells responsible for the myelination of the neurons in the PNS. Okay, so this is what about all the neuronal cells, and there are basically different diseases, that is results of a neurodegeneration. As it is pretty straightforward, and you need to remember at least that acetylcholine loss results in the Alzheimer's and related with your cognitive functions. Loss of dopamine results in the Parkinson related to the motor functions, and ALS is also part of motor functions due to the excess glutamate. Okay, so that's it for today's class. Okay guys, okay then, thank you so much.